Today I want to share with you how to make digestive bitters. This is something that should be in every traditional foods kitchen. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning how to be a modern pioneer in the kitchen, consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Now the first thing I want to share with you is that this video has 3 parts. So I'm going to put the chapter timestamps in the description underneath this video as well as in the pinned comment. So if any time you want to jump ahead to part 2 or part 3, you can easily do that. The second thing I want to share is that whenever I talk about herbal remedies, in this case digestive bitters, I do like to mention that I'm not a medical professional. So if you have any concerns about taking various herbal preparations, be sure to talk to your doctor, especially if you're pregnant or you're nursing or you're immune compromised. All of these things are very important to take into consideration when working with herbs as well as spices, because they do have medicinal properties in addition to culinary purposes. So be sure to check with your own medical professional to find out if it's safe to use these different preparations. Now, digestive bitters are very easy to make, but you don't need to write any of this down because I'll have the recipe over on my website, Mary's Nest, same name as my YouTube channel. And the link to that recipe will also be in the description underneath this video as well as the pinned comment. And actually in that recipe, I will have multiple bitters recipes because you may not have a particular ingredient, but you may have another ingredient. So I want to make this as easy as possible for you. Also, when it comes to making digestive bitters, I like to vary things up based on the season. So today we're going to make a digestive bitters that I think is nice for the fall and winter months. But I'll definitely have recipes for digestive bitters that I think are very helpful for digesting spring foods as well as summer foods. But first of all, I just want to address the point as to why do we want to make digestive bitters? Why do we want to take digestive bitters? The reason is, as we age, and I'm not talking about just being a senior citizen, even as we get into our 20s, 30s, middle age, and yes, then as senior citizens, we begin to make less and less digestive enzymes. And when we make less digestive enzymes, as the name implies, we don't digest our food as well. And what happens when we don't digest our food as well, we can't absorb the nutrients that the food has to offer to us. And the less nutrients we can absorb, the greater impact that has on our health. In essence, compromising our health, compromising our immunity, and so on and so forth. So sometimes we need to give our digestive enzymes a little bit of a boost. And that's where digestive bitters come in. Because bitter tasting herbs and spices, when taken in a very small amount before a meal, basically, in essence, primes the pump, so to speak. It primes our digestive pump, and it prepares our digestive system to digest the food that we're going to eat, and then allowing us to better extract the nutrients from that food. And especially when we have a traditional foods kitchen, and we're eating all these wonderful traditional nutrient-dense and nutrient-rich foods, we want to make sure that our digestive system is extracting every little bit of nutrition from those foods. Now here in part 1, I want to show you how to make digestive bitters. Then, jumping ahead, actually I'm going to jump past part 2 for a minute. In part 3, I'm going to show you how to allow these bitters to steep, and then how to strain them and decant them, and then how to use them, and then I want to talk about how long they can last. Hopping back to part 2, I want to share with you some of the origins of bitters and how they've been used by traditional cultures and how they gained the importance in the traditional foods kitchen. Okay, well, let's get started and make these digestive bitters. The first thing that you're going to need is a glass jar. Basically what I've got here is a pint-sized jar. It's just a pint-sized canning jar, and this is just the typical storage lid that goes with the pint-sized jar. However, you can make these digestive bitters in any amount you want, doubling or even tripling the recipe. Now, I just want to mention, if you've got the leak-proof lids that are made by the people who make the canning jars, this is the ball canning jar, these leak-proof lids are really terrific because this allows you to be able to shake the jar very easily, which we'll talk about in a minute. Sometimes I find these can leak a little. So if you have a jar, just maybe give it a test with some water to see if you can create a leak-proof seal, and then the job is going to be a lot easier and a lot neater. Next, you're going to need a little selection of herbs and spices. I'm going to go over those in a minute. And as I said, I'm going to share with you a number of variations, so don't worry if something sounds unfamiliar to you or you don't have it. So many herbs and spices are associated with helping digestion. So there's always many options available to you. Alrighty, the next thing you're going to need is something that's going to help you pull all of these wonderful digestive properties out of these herbs and spices. Now, what I've got here is vodka. Now, don't worry. I know a lot of you don't like to use alcohol when you're making tinctures or in this case bitters, and you certainly can use something like vinegar. Choices that you could consider would be apple cider vinegar. I think that would work very nicely. And then there's also just the plain white vinegar that's often used for pickling and canning, things like that. That would be an option as well. But if you can tolerate using a little bit of alcohol, alcohol works exceptionally well. And I like vodka because it's clear in color and tasteless. And many of you have said, oh, Mary, what types of vodka do you use and all? Really just a mid-priced vodka. You know, I don't like to buy something that's really inexpensive. I'm just not sure about the quality level, but it's definitely you don't need to buy anything that's very expensive. And if you live here in Austin, Texas, but I believe you may be able to find this nationwide, we have a 5th-generation distillery here right in Austin that has been making vodka, as I said, for 5 generations, and that's Tito's vodka. And I have no relationship with the company. I don't even drink. But if you are in Austin, I'm sure you'll recognize that name. And the amount of alcohol or vinegar that you're going to need is basically going to be based on the size of your jar, how much digestive bitter you're making. Now, I want to go over what I've got here on my plate. And if you notice, the largest area that I have here is something called angelica root. And if you've ever looked at recipes for digestive bitters, you will usually notice that there are 2 herbal roots that often make up the main base, so to speak, of a digestive bitter. And that's often angelica root and then gentian root. And they're usually used in combination together. Now, before I move forward with any of this, I want to mention that definitely look in your grocery store spice aisle to see what they may have available. Also, if they have a health food aisle or you have a health food store in your area, you're probably going to be able to find most of these herbs and spices. But if not, I'll definitely put links in the description and in the pinned comment underneath this video where you can learn more about them. Now, getting back to the angelica root, I find that this agrees very well with me and my family. Now, I tend to not use gentian root when I make digestive bitters, and you're definitely welcome to try it and see if it agrees with you, but I just want to share that some people can find themselves to be very sensitive to gentian root. Now, in a digestive bitters, it's going to be consumed in an extremely small amount. But even so, I always like to share that with you. So I definitely recommend doing a little research about gentian root. And if you tend to be the type of person that can be susceptible to digestive upset or stomach aches, things like that, you may want to consider leaving gentian root out of your digestive bitters. But I do have the angelica root, which is wonderful for digestion. And it has sort of like an earthy flavor, but again, you're not really going to notice much of this because you're taking this in a very small amount, which we'll talk more about in part 3. Next, what I've got here is ginger root. Now, don't worry if you don't specifically have ginger root. You can definitely use ginger powder or ground ginger. You're just going to use it in a smaller amount. I've got, going back to the angelica root, I've got 2 tablespoons here. This is the amount for about a pint-sized jar. So I've got 2 tablespoons of the angelica root and 1 tablespoon of the ginger root. You're going to use less if you use the ginger powder, and I'll have all of this information in the written recipe over on my website. But I had ginger root, so that's what I'm using. Now, you may be wondering, can you use fresh ginger? Definitely. You could slice up some ginger, you could grate up some ginger, any of that would work. Next, over here, I've got a tablespoon of dandelion root, another herb that is just so wonderful for digestion. And again, dandelion root, you may even have dandelions growing, and if they've not been exposed to pesticides and you want to pull them up, and a lot of people will collect them, during the season when they tend to grow, and then they'll dry them. It's pretty easy. I have a video where I show you how to dry herbs and spices. It's relatively easy to do, and you often don't need a dehydrator. There are things you can do even at just air drying them or in a very low temp oven. But dandelion root is often seen in many recipes for digestive bitters because it's wonderful at stimulating the palate, which then tells our digestive enzymes, okay, get ready to get to work. So I always like to include some dandelion root. Next, what I've got here is a cinnamon stick. Again, if you have a little ground ginger powder, that's fine too. I just recommend that if you can go with the Ceylon cinnamon, all the better. There are different types of cinnamon, but they're actually like I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, the cassia. There are different varieties of cinnamon, but Ceylon cinnamon is really going to be prized, especially for making digestive bitters. And then over here, I have a little star anise. If you just have some anise seeds, that can be good too. And the reason that I'm adding the cinnamon and the star anise, and we'll get to the orange one in a minute, is because I'm making these in the fall. And I enjoy adding different spices to my digestive bitters that go with the seasons, in essence. And when we're in the fall, we often think of things like cinnamon, anise. You could use some cloves. All of these are wonderful for a fall and winter digestive bitter. Then what I've got here is some dried orange zest. Again, it kind of adds that nice wintertime aroma and a little bit of flavor to the digestive bitters. Could you use just orange peel? Definitely. The pith from citrus is wonderful to stimulate digestion. So if you've peeled an orange and you have that peel, you can go ahead and put that right into your pint-sized jar. Really, you don't need very much, maybe a quarter of the peel with the pith intact. Could you use lemon zest or lemon peel? Definitely. All of these things would work. Any citrus would work. And that, I've just got about a teaspoon of the dried zest. So all we have to do, this is the fun part, it's also the very easy part. All we do is take all of this and put it right into our jar. Next, you're going to take your vodka or your vinegar, and you're just going to go ahead and fill up your jar. And you just want to leave about an inch of headspace on top, which will give you a little room so that you can shake this. Then go ahead and put your lid onto your jar. Give it a nice tight squeeze or twist. And then you're going to give this a couple of good shakes. And then what you're going to want to do is go ahead and put this in a cool, dark place like a pantry and just let it steep for as little as 2 weeks or as much as 4 weeks. It really doesn't matter. If you've never made bitters before, I would recommend letting it steep for 2 weeks. It'll have a slightly milder flavor, but it will also it'll still work very well as a bitter. Now, put it in your pantry in a place where when you open your pantry, you'll see it, because you want to remember best you can every day during that 2-week or 4-week period to just give it a shake and then put it aside. You can even give it 2 shakes if you're feeling enthusiastic. Alrighty, well, let's go and set this aside and move on to part 2. Well, for centuries, traditional cultures all over the world have used herbs and spices to aid digestion. Long before there were various products and medications made in modern society, traditional cultures had to rely on the herbs and spices that they had wherever they were in the world. My friend Michelle and I think many of you know Michelle. She has the YouTube channel and the wonderful website, Chocolate Box Cottage. She and I really enjoy talking about herbs, and she just was sharing with me a book that discussed how early American society used herbal remedies. And that's something that has always been very interesting to me. And it maybe around the 1960s here in the United States, that concept of herbal remedies and natural foods in general, traditional foods, so on and so forth, really started to become more interesting to people. There was really a natural foods movement, and people became interested in learning how traditional cultures, even here in the United States, how our ancestors relied on herbs and spices as well as traditional foods for their health, for their good health. And unfortunately, much of that with modern society was lost, but then in the 60s, at least here in the United States, there was this resurgence of interest in it. And that really has just snowballed ever since. And my interest in herbal remedies, and specifically digestive bitters, was really piqued when I learned about a woman named Hildegard von Bingen. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But she is a fascinating woman, and I have read a lot about her over the years, and I want to share some of her information with you because I think you will find it fascinating. Hildegard was such a visionary. She actually lived in the 12th century, and she wrote a book called Physica. I have a copy of it here. I'll put links to these books below. I highly recommend, if you can find some of these at your library or at a local used bookstore, all the better. I think that you'll really enjoy reading them. You know, of course, I'll have the links below, but definitely look for them in and around your area. This book at the time became a very, in essence, serious medical reference to the people that were in her world, her 12th century world, what was known to her and her surroundings. She lived in Germany, and much of the area in which she lived, as well as the countries around her, would refer to this book for how to help heal their patients. And this is another book I have of hers, Hildegard. It's of, I guess, von in German may mean of, but Hildegard of Bingen's Medicine. And I guess what I find so fascinating is, number one, she was a woman, and myself being a woman, I find that interesting, and that she lived in the 12th century. This is fantastic to me. Hildegard was a nun and living in this town of Bingen in Germany. What I will say is, unfortunately, a lot of her information was forgotten about. And then, with this resurgence of interest in natural foods and natural remedies, so on and so forth, her information was, in essence, rediscovered. And in the 80s, in the 1980s, people started really taking an interest in her and starting to write books about her and about her remedies and what she recommended in terms of herbal remedies, home remedies, so on and so forth. And a lot of her focus was on digestion, and hence the development of digestive bitters. And her writings at the time of her life were so influential to the area in which she lived that in the year 2012, in modern day, she was made what is called a doctor of the church. Now, not in the medical sense like an MD, doctor of the church, more of in the sense of an educational doctor, like what we would consider today, like maybe a PhD. And she was made a doctor of the church. This is the Catholic Church gave her this designation because her writings were so influential and still influential to this day. I find that fantastic. There's not a lot of doctors of the church. I'm Catholic, and I believe maybe there's about 33. I'm not 100% sure. But 4 of them are women, and one is Hildegard. So I just find that very fascinating. And in the back of this book, it says she was highly honored for the information that she provided on healing through a multi-dimensional approach to the body and the mind. So she was on the forefront of integrative medicine. This is wonderful. It's just today there's so many, like I've shared with you, I talk a lot about Dr. Andrew Weil, the medical doctor from Harvard, but who is also basically the modern day father, so to speak, of integrative medicine, where they look to treat the whole person, both body and mind. And so I think that's wonderful. And it says on the back of this book, widely accepted, her writings were widely accepted by physicians and religious healers of her time. So she's really to be admired. And the Physica, this is basically very much in many ways a kind of a reprint of her original document, which I find fascinating to look at. And you can see I have a collection. I've been learning and educating myself about her for a very long time. So I have a lot of books about her. But what is especially nice is that other people have written about her, and it's not just, her writings are not just for people who are interested in something from a religious perspective. They are basically for anyone interested in learning about the healing properties of herbs and using herbs, especially to aid in digestion. And because her Physica was written in the 12th century, people have gone on to write about her writings in books that are very adaptable to modern society and make the consumption of her information very readable. And some of the books that I have really enjoyed this is Hildegard of Bingen's Holistic Health Secrets. This is wonderful. And then this, I think, if you were just looking for one book, I think this book is excellent. It's called From Saint Hildegard's, as I shared with you. She not only is a doctor of a doctor of the church, she's also a Catholic saint. And this is From Saint Hildegard's Kitchen, Foods of Health, Foods of Joy. And this is wonderful because it's just chock full of all types of recipes. And something I have to tell you from the perspective of a traditional foods kitchen, Hildegard writes a lot about spelt. She used a lot of spelt in her recipes for health and healing. And I have such a special place in my heart for spelt. I love spelt. I bake with it, I cook with it in terms of making it just a grain, as a cereal. I use spelt in many ways. Now don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like einkorn, I do, but einkorn is a little more difficult. You know, those of you who may be baking with it know, it's a little more difficult to transition, you know, to sort of multi-purpose recipes. But I find that spelt, when you're replacing, you know, if you've moved from replacing all-purpose flour or bread flour, and then you've moved to maybe whole wheat flour, and then you want to start experimenting with the ancient grains, spelt is just so easy to transition to from whole wheat to spelt. You know, spelt is a wheat, but it's an ancient wheat. And so in this particular cookbook, there are a lot of recipes for spelt. And it really covers, you know, I always like to, whenever I talk with you all about cookbooks, I always like to share a little bit from the table of contents. But there's a section on the basic ingredients, and then herbs, spices, and condiments, and then St. Hildegard's own special recipes. And it's primarily breakfast salads and soups. And then there's a section on cereals and cereal grains, and it's all about baking with spelt. So I just love that. And then she has pasta recipes, meats and poultry, fish, eggs and egg dishes, vegetables. I mean, the list is very long. It's a little oversized paperback. It's not expensive. I highly recommend this. I think you'll really enjoy it. And then this is Hildegard of Bingen's Spiritual Remedies. If you find the topic of Hildegard very interesting, you might enjoy this book. A very interesting approach to the mind and body connection, because that was very interesting to her. And so really healing the mind and healing the body, healing the whole person. I guess that's the best way to describe it. It's all about healing the whole person, and I really like that. Now, this is not about Hildegard, but I wanted to share this book with you because I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's called The Healing Garden, Cultivating and Handcrafting Herbal Recipes. The entire book is about herbal remedies, so if you enjoy that, you will definitely enjoy this book. And it's by Juliette Blanquesport. And please forgive me if I'm pronouncing her name incorrectly, but she's the founder of the Chestnut School of Herbal Medicine. And this is a wonderful book. Definitely look for this. It's a bit of a tome, you know, it's a sizable book, and it's a little bit on the pricey side. You'll see mine's like a little damaged. If you can find it at a used bookstore, all the better. But, you know, my books are tools, so I'm always happy to find them at used bookstores. If they're a little dinged and bent and all, I don't worry about it. But this one is definitely worth taking out of the library and really looking through it and seeing if this is something that you would be interested in, because she talks all about, you know, cultivating the herbs, growing the herbs, and then how to use them and how to make remedies with them. It's really quite fascinating. And, you know, this is a subject I love. You know, I've shared with you videos in the past where I talk about the different herbs that I like to grow or to buy, and the different remedies that I like to make with them. Herbs are so powerful. You know, we use them, and spices as well, we use them for culinary purposes, but there's so much more than that. But what's nice is the more we learn about them, and the more we can use the very flavorful ones, like oregano and thyme and rosemary. These all have medicinal purposes, and by incorporating them into our everyday foods, we only benefit our health. I mean, we're just benefiting our health by incorporating them. And it's so easy to do because they add so much wonderful flavor and richness to our food. But then when we take it one step further and start using them to make herbal remedies, and I'll definitely link to a playlist that I put together for all of you, all about the herbs that I like to grow and the herbal remedies that I make and what properties, medicinal properties different herbs offer and so on and so forth. And I think that you'll really enjoy that. But what's fantastic is when we take it one step further and we start turning them into these herbal preparations, we further benefit our digestion and we further benefit our health, because there is something to be said about good digestion. It's funny, my mother, who's of Italian heritage, always focuses on digestion, and she's 97 years old, so there must be something to it. And it's cute because she says, oh, Americans, you hear a lot, heart disease, you got to stop heart disease. And certainly that's very important. But she always felt that digestion, good digestion, should be at the forefront of our concern, because her attitude was good digestion will cure everything, will cure all your ails. And so there's definitely something to be said for that. And bitters, digestive bitters, can really improve our digestion and help us to, as I mentioned earlier, prime the pump before every meal to make sure that we are always maximizing every little bit of nutrition that we can get out of the food that we are eating and that we're preparing. And as traditional home cooks, we spend a lot of time often sourcing our food to find really good, high-quality food that is nutrient-rich, that is nutrient-dense. And then we spend time preparing it to make it as nutritious as possible. So when we go to eat it, we want to make sure we're getting our money's worth, in essence, and our time and money's worth, and absorbing all of those nutrients. So I definitely think if this subject interests you, you'll enjoy learning more about Hildegard as well as the Chestnut School of Herbal Medicine. And one other thing I want to mention in talking about Hildegard von Bingen is there's a company, it's called Herbal. It's spelt a little differently than that. And I'll put a link in the description and in the pinned comment if you want to learn more about it. But they make digestive bitters based on Hildegard's actual recipes. Now, we can make our own homemade, but I do want to share that with you if it's something that would interest you, because they actually make them in a dry form, in a tablet form that you can chew. However, theirs do contain the gentian that I mentioned earlier. So if it's something you decide to try, just try maybe just chewing one, just be a little careful about it. But it is interesting that their main focus of the company is on creating products based on her recipes. They also sell spelt. I believe they do sell whole grain spelt, but they carry cracked spelt, which is wonderful because you can use it in the same way you would use cracked oats. So instead of making an oatmeal, like steel cut oats, in essence, their cracked spelt is in essence like a steel cut oat just made with spelt. And so you can make a spelt meal instead of an oatmeal for breakfast. And I love doing that. And they sell it, you can buy spelt anywhere. But that is something that's interesting, that primarily their product line is focused on the things that she suggested that we eat for good health. So I'll be sure to share some information about them below. Alrighty, now let's move on to part 3. Now these are the bitters that we just made, and these are ones that have been steeping for a while. Now, I didn't have a leak-proof jar or a leak-proof lid for this particular jar, so what I did, and maybe you want to do the same too if you find that you just don't have a leak-proof lid, is I would just spin it like this a little every day, and then that would help kind of distribute everything best I could, and then it would just settle down and continue to steep for the rest of the day. Now, in order to strain this, what you're going to need is a mesh strainer and then some sort of vessel in which we can strain the liquid into. This is a very tightly woven mesh strainer, and as you see, it's a pretty small one. So I'm not going to worry about lining this with any type of flour sack towel or cheesecloth. However, if your strainer doesn't have a really tight mesh like this, you can definitely line it to keep out any little bits of debris that may pour through the strainer. Now when you open it, you'll definitely smell the alcohol, but with all of the infusion of the herbs and spices, you can also smell those as well. It actually has a very nice aroma. Now I'm going to go very slowly and very carefully with this process. So now we've got our digestive bitters, and it looks and smells wonderful. Next, we have to decant this. So if you go ahead and use a pint-sized jar, by the time you have all of your herbs and spices in there, and then you top it off with your vodka or your vinegar, and you allow the 1-inch headspace, if you use a pint-sized jar, you're probably going to wind up with 1.5 cups of digestive bitters when you're all done. Now we want to decant this, and the best way to decant this is in amber or dark colored bottles. Although the alcohol is a wonderful preservative, the dark bottle will also help protect the efficacy of the various extracts that have been pulled out of the herbs and spices that we steeped in the alcohol. Now, if you've seen my video about kitchen treasures from the garbage, you know that I like to collect all sorts of bottles, all sorts of things in general that other people might discard. So if you can start collecting dark colored bottles, maybe from friends and neighbors who would otherwise throw them out, all the better, or maybe different products that you've purchased that come in amber colored or other dark types of colored bottles, definitely save them, because they will come in very handy, not only for decanting herbal bitters, but also decanting a whole host of herbal remedies. Now you can decant this in a large bottle like I'm going to use today, or you can decant them in smaller bottles, even bottles that may have these little dropper applications to them. These are wonderful, and something real tiny like this you might even be able to carry along with you and use this before you're eating out. So any option is fine, but I highly recommend using a dark colored bottle. If you only have light colored bottles, that's fine too, and I love the idea that one of you shared, and I want to share with all of you, is if that's all you have, just put it in a brown paper bag, and that'll help protect it from the light. Now these little baby funnels work great, especially for the jars that have, or the bottles that have these little eyedropper attachments, and we'll talk about why that can be handy too, but they also work for these larger bottles as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just slowly decant this into my amber colored bottle. Then you just put your cap on, and now you can go ahead and store this in your pantry, or if you wish, you can also store it in your refrigerator. I actually like to store it in my refrigerator because I find that when it's a little chilled, it's almost a little easier to take than when it's room temperature, but that's definitely personal preference. Now, in terms of shelf life, digestive bitters are in essence a forever food. The alcohol is a very strong preservative. Now, I don't make my digestive bitters with vinegar. However, vinegar is often considered a forever food. So the shelf life of your digestive bitters made with vinegar may be very long as well. Now let's talk about how to take these digestive bitters. First of all, as I mentioned earlier in the beginning, if you're pregnant, nursing, so on and so forth, you really want to talk to your doctor before you would take any digestive bitters. And you would not want to take this particular digestive bitter, how I've made this one. Generally, digestive bitters, when they are approved for a mother who is pregnant or may be nursing, are generally very mild ones, often made with things like just chamomile. However, again, you really need to take caution, and if you are pregnant or nursing, this is not for you. Now, how I like to take these is 1/4 teaspoon, just put right onto my tongue, and that's it. And I just basically, 1/4 teaspoon is so small, it's basically absorbed pretty quickly by my tongue, and it just mixes with my saliva and I swallow, and that's that. Some people, if you do have an eyedropper bottle, like to be able to just put some in their eyedropper and then drip it down onto their tongue. So there are different ways to do this. And if you're new to digestive bitters, you may just start with a drop or two. I'm in my 60s and I need a lot of help with digestion. And so I do take 1/4 teaspoon of digestive bitters before eating. Now, if you've had an exceptionally heavy meal and after that meal you find you are still having trouble digesting or you develop indigestion, you can also take some digestive bitters then. And I also want to add, if you're not comfortable just putting it right onto your tongue, you can mix your digestive bitters in a little bit of water. Don't take a lot because you don't want to dilute the digestive juices that you're creating. But, no more than a couple of tablespoons of water. Put your 1/4 teaspoon of digestive bitters into the water, drink that down, and then go ahead and eat your meal. The same as if you're experiencing indigestion after a heavy meal. Put 1/4 teaspoon in a little bit of water and then drink that down, and hopefully that'll help you digest your meal and overcome your indigestion. And when you go ahead and mix this with water, definitely use room temperature water, because even though I do take my digestive bitters cold out of the refrigerator, it's basically just being absorbed onto my tongue and being warmed up by my natural body temperature. But if you are going to put it into water, you don't want to put it into cold water or even ice cold water. You want just a room temperature water. And the reason is room temperature or warm beverages help enhance digestion, where cold beverages can slow digestion. So that's just a general good rule to follow whenever you're eating. Even if you're enjoying a beverage with your meal, better that you enjoy something that's room temperature or even a warm beverage like a tea to aid in digestion overall. So if you would like to learn more about herbal preparations and herbal remedies, be sure to click on this video over here where I have a whole playlist that covers teas and tinctures and how to grow herbs and how to even make herbal creams both for the face and your feet. And I look forward to seeing you over there in my Texas Hill Country Kitchen. Love and God bless.